go up. Oh, you're gonna hit your head right there. Okay. More flights. Start climbing and don't stop until you meet somebody. Thank you for coming. And you too. Watch your head right here. That's where you're gonna bump it.
Me?
Yeah. There's foam there now. When I was on the ship, there was no
I never
foam.
have trouble with hitting my
No, you see, you ducked. I saw you duck. Right.
Of course, you can do that when you're 18, 21 years old. Skip every step. Holy shit, that's young. You can film every landing.
Morning. Thank you.
Oh, airplane landing.
Good morning. Okay, so some of you please watch your heads because there's a lot of low-hanging things. Morning. 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 Good. Good morning. Yeah, please watch your head in here. The ship was finished in 1945, so maybe it's a bit shorter. How are you doing?
So, I gathered it was many tall people in the boat. Tall people? Oh, yeah, there were.
Morning.
When was it built? They just stuck.
Yeah, 33 to 45. It was commissioned a week after Japan
My
surrendered.
niece is.
Hello, come on in. Folks, if we can just move this way a bit, we probably have a full house. Nobody's breathing too hard. That means you're all in good shape. Good morning. Okay, good morning. Good morning, everybody. My name's Fred. I'll be your docent for the island tour. We're going to start here in Pri-fly, and we're going to go to the chart room and then on to the bridge. About 4 minutes in each space. You're in the area, as I said, called primary flight control. This serves the same purpose as a control tower at an airport. Two folks in charge up here would be the air boss and mini boss. Both would be naval commanders in rank, and both would have a lot of cockpit time. They would have commanded fixed-wing tailhook squadrons in the past. And their job is to be in charge of the launching, the recovery, and the shipboard handling of the aircraft during flight operations. So we have, I'll describe flight operations very quickly. Basically, they're practice for the pilots, and we have planes being launched off the two catapults about every 90 seconds. That means one goes airborne every 45 seconds. They're recovered every 45 seconds. And so they fly around for a while and do their practice. Now, helping the air boss and mini boss would be a young petty officer. He would stand behind this board, which would swing around this way. And that board is called the Land Launch Status Board. It records the location of aircraft while they're flying. And the petty officer working on that board can't stand between the board and the air boss. So he has to stand on the backside and write backwards with a grease pencil. He gets his information through headphones from radars. So it's quite a talent. They say these guys are so good at writing backwards, they just write their letters home backwards. Their loved ones hold them up to the mirror to read them. That could be a bit of a stretch, but it's quite a talent. Along the window are boxes with flip-top lids. Each box contains a flight manual, and the whole idea there is during flight operations, a pilot, usually a junior officer, stands behind each box Each box corresponds to a particular type of aircraft. Should an aircraft have a problem while it's airborne, the idea is to look up a solution to the problem and get it to the pilot before the pilot returns, or so the pilot can return. Here's a box with 4 gauges. The first 3 gauges correspond to the 3 cross-deck pendants. Those are the big wire cables that go across the aft end of the flight deck. Those are the cables that the incoming aircraft doing about 160 miles an hour catch with their tail hook. And the cable pays out under hydraulic controls to 340 feet, a little more than a football field, bring the aircraft to a stop. The aircraft's moved out of the way, the cable is retracted back to battery position. The whole idea is to make sure that the cable hydraulics are set to the weight of the aircraft, because if it's not properly set, you can damage the aircraft. The last gauge is for a crash barrier. That's a cable in the forward of all the others. It goes up about, I think it's about 10 feet in the air, carries a big nylon net. Should an aircraft have a problem with landing gear not going down or a tail hook that won't descend, it would skid in on its belly at 160, and it would go just like a big fish, be caught in the net. And actually the system works pretty well with generally minor damage to the aircraft, no injury to the pilot. And then there's a box here that controls a lighting system located directly across from us. And when you're on the flight deck, if you look over there, you'll see an area of the ship where it sticks out over the water on the port side. It's a series of lights, green lights going horizontally, about 30 feet of green lights at right angles of the aircraft coming in, and then the middle of their orange lights. The object for the pilot, when he or she is about a mile or 2 off, they want to keep the orange light right in line with the green lights. If an orange light appears above the horizontal green light, it means the pilot's coming in a bit high. If it's low, they're low. So that's the idea there. Ideally, they want a 3.5% glide slope, descending at 12 feet per second. And when they go over the end of the flight deck, they should be about 12 feet, and then a second later, they're down. We're going to go down to the chart room. Please follow me and be really careful going through some of these doors. They have the raised thresholds.
Not necessarily all of it. So this room gets ready more?
Oh, those weren't there. Use them? Use those a lot?
No.
Oh, man, that too much stuff. Oh, that one, if it's one like that, no. What goes up? What is it?
We've got a couple more coming in and we'll get started. Okay. All right, I think that's almost it. Is that about it,
There's
sir?
a couple more.
A couple more. I guess we could take a couple more folks up here if you want to come up. 2 people, 2.5. Okay, great. All right, guys. Welcome to the chart room. This is where the navigator and his assistants, the quartermasters, prepare the navigation plan and keep track of where the ship's going. You'll see some charts in here. Charts differ than regular land maps in that they give us information which is of interest to the mariner. For example, harbor depths, key features of land that you can see from sea. Those parallel lines going across the charts called parallels of latitude, telling you how far north or south of the equator you are. San Diego, we're about 32 degrees north. And then the vertical lines called meridians of longitude. They tell you how far east or west you are of some point. That point is Greenwich, England, which we call 0 degrees. 180 degrees going around both sides of the earth until you get to the international date line. Why do we have these lines in this coordinate system? Because if you didn't have it, there'd be no way to describe where you were at sea, or you wouldn't know. You could say, well, I guess I'm 200 miles south of a Y, but I'm not sure. So that's the whole point. That kind of a grid system has been around actually for centuries. Now, how do you find your position at sea in the first place today? Let's say you're in the middle of the Indian Ocean in a rowboat. You have a cell phone. You take your cell phone out and you go to Google Maps, basically. You do GPS. GPS was invented in the late 70s by the Army and some scientists, and it was immediately adopted, of course, by the Navy, the Air Force, and everybody, because it's a simple and reliable system. It's very accurate today. You can tell your position within a few feet. Originally, the best you could do was about 100 feet. There are other ways of finding out where you are. You can use a radar as it spins around. You see some point on your chart, and the radar identifies it, and it will tell you two things. It'll give you a bearing or a line you're on, and it'll give you a distance. So if you have a line and a distance, you have all the info you need. Now, not used for a long time, or well, I should say since 1996, was celestial navigation. In 1996, the U.S. Naval Academy stopped teaching it because it was considered too old-fashioned. Celestial navigation is used as sextant. There's a picture of one there, and there's an actual sextant there. A sextant is a device to measure the angular distance of a celestial body like the sun above the horizon. What's the point in doing that? Well, if you hold that up to your eye at noon, let's say you're on a sailboat or a big ship, you get the sun in the little viewfinder. It has a shade so you don't hurt your eye. You turn the little dial on the bottom and you make the sun appear in the viewfinder to come down and just kiss the horizon. Then you look down at the scale on the bottom and you see how many degrees the sun is above the horizon at that time. If you know that at noon, and if you know the declination that day, that is how far this Earth is tilting on its axis, either in the northern hemisphere northward, where you have summer and winter, and in the southern hemisphere. If you know the declination, and people have been able to figure that since the ancient Greeks, then you can get your latitude. Boom, just like that. You know how far north and south of the equator. Columbus could do it. What they couldn't do until the mid-1700s, nobody knew how to figure out their longitude. They didn't know how far east or west they were at some point. Lots of ships were being wrecked on reefs and this and and other obstacles because no one knew exactly where they were in terms of being how far east or west. And so it wasn't until the invention of a clock, an Englishman invented it, a carpenter. He spent his life working on a very accurate little clock that could be taken to sea. And if you could take a clock to sea that tells you when you left England, for example, you set it at English time, and you go out west across the Atlantic, and you look at noon, and you see it's noon in your time, and it's 2:30 in the afternoon in England. You know you're 2 hours and a half away. Every hour is 15 minutes of latitude. If you divide 24 into 360 degrees, 24 hours, you get 15 degrees. So that was a huge invention. The Englishman who invented it was promised 1,000 pounds sterling from the Admiralty. And what happened? He spent the rest of his life trying to collect the money. There's a great book about that called Longitude. So it was a huge advancement in navigation. Okay, I've spent long enough on this. We're going to go up to the bridge now. Please follow me. I'm going to go through that door, and again, watch your feet as you go through the doorways.
Well, just a
float on the water.
So, I was very good, 20,000 gallons a day. Not gonna create economy.
We're gonna wait here a minute.
Constantly have to be.
We're gonna wait a minute while they go through.
Temple truck, bring the hoses over and start pumping 3,000 gallons a minute of diesel fuel burning. At the same time, we're doing that. We're doing what we call vertical.
I should have pointed out when we were back there in navigation, the Naval Academy stopped teaching celestial navigation in 1996
Normal steaming.
because it said it's old fashioned, you don't need it.
Once a week, maybe a little more often.
But just recently, a couple of years ago, they started teaching it again. And why was that? Why do they teach celestial navigation? Because you don't need electricity. A ship systems can be hacked, their navigation, all their electrical. But with a celestial navigation, all you need is a piece of paper telling you the declination for the day, a clock,